Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Father Son Packers podcast, your favorite news source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy. I am here, as always, with my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing good. Already lamenting some of my fantasy football choices this week, but that's okay.
Shouldn't you have gotten used to that by now?
You would think so, seeing as I've never won a league.
You feel like the expectations shouldn't be that high at this point. My teams, on the other hand, they're doing okay. They're not doing that bad. I feel okay about this year, except for one or two picks, three or four picks.
3 or 4 or 5 or 6 picks.
Mike Williams. I'm riding the Mike Williams roller coaster right now. He was great tonight, Thursday night, as we're recording tonight on Thursday night.
That was a better ride than the Juju.
Yes, tonight at least. But,
Tonight,
Mike Williams is a roller coaster for a reason. But anyway, you guys are not here to hear about our fantasy exploits.
I sure hope not.
You guys are here because it is officially Bears week. It is week 2. We will be playing the Bears on Sunday Night Football. And we are here to break down what we think we need to watch for in that game and how the matchup is going to go, we think. But yeah, Dad, you ready to just jump right into it? I'm going to start.
Let's just jump right
in. Sounds
start with
good.
the injury report.
Sounds good. Like we do every week on Thursday, we will be starting with the injury report. And if you like what you hear on this podcast, we'll just do a couple quick pitches. We're also on YouTube. You can check us out. Please subscribe, Father Son Packers Podcast. And we're also on Twitter, at Father Son Packer on Twitter. Please hit us with a follow, hit us with a subscribe, get our numbers up. Because why not, But anyway, yes, let's start with the injury report. And let's start with the Packers side of the injury report. On Thursday, we had 3 DNPs, did not practice. David Bakhtiari, Mercedes Lewis for vet rest, and John Runyon still in concussion protocol. We're hoping that Bakhtiari's was just a day off, but with him, it's going to be mysterious until it's not.
Yeah, though LaFleur said it was a planned, I think, rest and not a setback.
Yeah.
But,
I don't know if I believe it.
That's all I can say. Is what
yes.
That's what he said.
And like I said, I think it's just going to be a mystery until he's back on there for multiple games in a row.
There have been a lot of
remote
video
setbacks, quote unquote,
medical non-experts analyzing
the limp. Yes,
Bakhtiari's walk.
Yes, yes, listeners. If you hadn't seen this, there are a couple tweets, some videos of Bakhtiari at practice, kind of limping around. Doesn't look great, but, linemen kind of always do kind of walk with a limp. It's kind of, I feel like, a standard way of being, or maybe I'm just being an optimist. The Packers also had 2 limited participants. Elgton Jenkins was limited on Thursday, and Allen Lazard was limited on Thursday. I think Jenkins is probably a lot closer than Bakhtiari to playing. I think he's still probably a week off, though. Did that Ryan Wood tweet from last week include Elgton?
Yes,
as
it was
probably
Elgton
not playing?
And Bakhtiari that Ryan Wood tweeted were unlikely to play this week as well as last week.
Yeah, so I wouldn't hold out hope for him, but Lazard has been looking pretty good in the videos we've seen of the.
His movement looks great.
Yeah.
I mean, his making sharp cuts in the brief sort of helmets and shorts or maybe even full pads videos I've seen from this week of him making cuts and accelerating looked fine. Actually.
Yeah, and if you guys, the listeners, want to check out some of those videos, I know Matt Schneidman has some videos of Lazard cutting on air, just running some routes, and he does look pretty good. The only reason I'd be tentative to say he is playing this week is because last week he said essentially that he would have to pray to play last week, so who knows? Like, he was so far off from playing last week, I don't know how close he can be in a week's time. But
maybe his prayers are being answered.
Maybe. Can you pray for Bakhtiari also, please? And then we've had 3 full participants who are fully back to practice. Jake Hansen, Keyshawn Nixon, and Quay Walker. Hansen was never really that much in doubt, but it is nice to see Nixon and Walker, who both left the game on Sunday with shoulder injuries, be back so quickly. It does seem like they're going to play, which is great.
They've been full participants all week, so
yeah,
that looks like good news.
That's pretty big, and because defense wasn't great last week, but they're going to need all their starters to be good this week. On the Bears side, going over to that side, they have had 2 DNPs on Thursday. Blasingame and Velus Jones, which is one of the running backs, and their wide receiver, first year player.
Right, rookie wide receiver.
Rookie wide receiver.
Speedster
and punt
out of...
Yeah.
I don't
Honestly,
remember.
He looks pretty good, like returning punts and kicks in the preseason. So I feel like
he was an excellent returner in college.
I feel like
I was mock drafting him a lot in the 4th and 5th round.
Yeah, he gets mocked a bit because he's 25 years old as a rookie, so he's kind of an older rookie. But it would have been an interesting test for the Packers special teams to have to go against a returner like that. But we'll see.
The fact that he was downgraded from Wednesday to Thursday, I think, does not seem like well for him to play. He was limited on Wednesday and then a DNP Thursday.
Yeah, that's the type of trend that usually indicates the player's not going to play. And then they have upgraded Riley Reif, one of their starting O-linemen, to a full participant on Thursday. So it sounds like he's going to play, so their O-line's going to be mostly intact, which is nice. And that is the extent of the Bears' injury report. Fairly short injury report for them. Some quick additional news from Packers land. Just throw this in there. Chris Barnes, although we did get good news on his injury, that it seems like a high ankle sprain, he was still put on IR. And Caleb Jones, the big offensive tackle rookie who played really well in the preseason, was moved up to the 53, presumably because someone else was probably going to sign him. And then
That's
they
been
did
the general
sign.
Speculation is they're afraid they're going to lose him. And Barnes,
Yeah,
I should say, the good news on him is that the
not gone for the
injury is
year.
not season-ending.
Yeah, he's not gone for the year. He should be back some point later in the year. And it seems like they want to use him because they were running some 3 linebacker sets out there, some 4-3 stuff.
Well, that's something that maybe we could talk about.
I
How
thought,
well that 3 linebacker set was working.
I mean, they didn't run it that much, small sample size. I wanted them to run some more 4-3 going into the year because they have 3 good linebackers and a lot of good down linemen. But anyway, and they also signed rookie safety Mike Brown from Miami of Ohio to the practice squad in Caleb Jones's place. So those 3 transactions happened since our last recording on Sunday. Just a reminder that we do post-game podcasts every Sunday night as well. So you can catch us on Sunday night after the Bears game, hopefully recapping a win. But anyway, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of our game preview. And we're going to start with a brief little segment we like to call Previously On, where we talk about what each team was up to in the previous week. We've already talked a bit about the Packers. You can check out our post-game pod from last Sunday on any podcast streaming platform of your choice. But essentially, I think we can both agree that the Packers lost because of terrible offensive line play, bad defensive communication, and overall poor energy. That's at least my 3 takeaways from what happened to the Packers last week.
I would say those are the sort of the biggest factors. I mean, not that many people had what you would call a good game for the Packers.
Maybe 3.
Dillon, Jones,
Kenny.
Kenny.
Dillon, Jones, and Kenny, I think, are the only people that really had decent games. And, I mean, Dobbs was okay. But Dillon, Jones, and Kenny were the only ones with good games. But, I think that's pretty much a nice, tight summary of the Packers last week. So let's talk about previously on the Chicago Bears and what they've been up to. Dad, do you want to lead us off with this one?
So I'll start out that they, I think, shocked
They shocked
the
me.
NFL world that they beat the Niners. I don't think anybody really gave them a chance. But, of course, the game was played in a downpour. Just
an absolute monsoon, especially by the fourth quarter. First 3 quarters, it was like raining, but it wasn't that. The fourth quarter, you couldn't even see the field because the camera was covered in water.
So it's a little hard. So you don't expect that result to be very predictive of what their real ability is going to be. I mean, both quarterbacks complained about being able to grip the ball. So, like, the passing game was kind of off.
Yeah, and I mean, the Niners were 6.5 point favorites on the road. So it was a pretty sizable upset for the Bears.
And they started as looking like they were just going to stop because the Niners' first possession, they just marched down the field and looked like they were cruising. And then Deebo Samuel fumbles the ball, and then everything got kind of weird after that. But the Bears only completed 8 out of 17 passes, and the Niners only completed 13 out of 28.
It was an ugly game. It is one of those games that it was one of those games that you forget it happened because it wasn't on red zone because no one was in the red zone.
And David Montgomery, the running back, was their leading pass catcher with 4 catches.
Yeah,
but his running was only, I think he only had 1.5 yards per carry.
I mean, that whole game was such a slop fest.
But though Khalil Herbert was out,
I heard he looked better than most people have said. He looked better than Montgomery, And
he ran the ball much better than Montgomery.
yeah, he's
And
a
so-
solid player. I liked him
and then
coming
the
out of
question
Virginia
is-
Tech a lot.
Is Equinemius St. Brown their second best receiver? Former Packer, EQ. Is he the Bears' second best receiver? Wide receiver, that is.
Yeah, and I mean, possibly he was not one of their best performers, but we'll get into that later. But it does look like the Bears defense was able to get after Trey Lance a little bit, so that's something to keep an eye on because the Packers O-line has struggled. They were able to get
both teams got 2 sacks.
both teams got 2 sacks. Yep, so it's kind of maybe we're in for more of the same with poor O-line playing good. Hopefully for the Packers, good
it's hard
D-line
to
play.
say, exactly what's going on with it because I would say that like a really wet, poor traction game, bending around the edge would be difficult.
Anchoring would also be difficult though.
And anchoring would also. So
I feel like it's just kind of 6 in one, half dozen in the
who
other.
it favors when it's a mess like that.
Yep.
But the Bears' run defense wasn't very good in those conditions.
No, it was not.
They gave up 4.8 yards per carry, and they themselves were only able to get 2.7 yards per carry.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into, it kind of parallels what the PFF grades were for this game. We just have a brief thing from PFF about their best and worst players from the game, just to keep an eye on for this game. Obviously, with PFF, the grades are kind of wonky sometimes, but they can be a good data point at least to go off of sometimes. But it kind of does parallel the fact that their 3 worst performers on defense were Roquan Smith, which I know is probably a bit of a anomaly, seeing as he is normally one of their best players, and then Angelo Blackson and Justin Jones, who are both D tackles. It seems that whole middle of the line, and I mean, you can say, were they graded poorly because they were giving up this much, or did they give up this much because they graded poorly? I mean, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. They didn't play very well, and so you hope that that's something that the Packers can take advantage of as well, running Dillon and Jones up the middle a little bit and seeing if that poor play carries over from week 1 to week 2 for the against the Packers.
Yeah.
In terms of other... Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, in terms of other poor performers, Fields did not have a very good game. He was one of their worst performers per PFF, although he did have an excellent rushing grade. But he had a 65.8, but he did have a pretty poor passing grade, but so did Lance, but he had a little bit worse than Lance.
Yeah, and I looked over some of those passes from Fields. I mean, he found a couple of wide open receivers on some plays.
The one to the touchdown to what is his name? The guy who got drafted by the Niners in the second round. I'm blanking on his freaking name. If I think of it, I'll say it. But he was wide open. He was just a broken play, and the guy was not covered because Hufanga came up a little too much.
Yeah, but then Fields on his interception, I think he basically just misread the defense and did not see the linebacker waiting there on the crossing route and just basically threw it where it was an easy pick.
It was Dante Pettis, by the way. I knew it started with a P, and I could not get it.
I was thinking too, but I couldn't get the name Pringle out of my head.
And well, that's a good segue because for the Bears' best performers, their best performer was Byron Pringle on offense, who I know you were talking about EQ as their second best receiver, but Pringle had the better game overall. And then Tevin Jenkins and Larry Boron both also had very good games. So their O-line actually had a pretty solid game grading-wise, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on, I think. And then, Byron Pringle is another receiver who had some decent run with the Chiefs. And I mean, he didn't have a great game against the Niners. He actually only ended up having like a catch for 22 yards. So really not a whole lot of stats, but I guess they thought he was running decent routes out there. So not it wasn't a very prolific offensive game for anyone. So,
No, it's really hard to get any kind of
But on
feel for counting stats or anything from this game.
Yeah. On defense, their best player, though, was this rookie, Dominique Robinson, who was giving Mike McGlinchey the business on the right side of the line. And hopefully that is not a precursor or a window into our future.
Yeah, something we'll revisit.
Yeah, and then there are other some other poor performers. Montgomery didn't have a great game for them, and some other good performers. Jalen Johnson, their corner, had a nice game, and Eddie Jackson, their safety, who had the pick versus Trey Lance.
I
really
wonder if that's
ended the game.
The kind of the driving force on. I think that PFF gives a lot of points.
I mean, it
for
was
a
the most important
turnover.
play of the game, to be fair.
And he made a nice read on the ball. He though Lance, I think, is
Did
just
not see
staring
him.
down his receiver.
Yeah, I didn't see
watched
him at
that
all.
play. He's staring down his receiver, and Eddie Jackson sees it and just cuts in front for the ball.
But yeah, so that's kind of previously on. The Bears are ahead of the Packers in the standings.
Man.
They are second in the NFC North right now, and the Packers are last in the NFC North right now because they have an 0-1 in division.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So that's our previously on. Our next segment that we're going to do is called Blast from the Past, where we take a look at kind of how the Packers, at least under Matt LaFleur, have fared against this team in the past and against people from this team specifically in the past. Under Matt LaFleur, the Packers have not lost to the Bears. They are 6-0 with an average margin of victory of 12.5 points. Rodgers under LaFleur versus the Bears has 122.2 passer rating, about 232 yards per game, 68% completion percentage, 2.7 touchdowns per game, and has not yet, knock on wood, thrown a pick against the Bears under Matt LaFleur.
And let's not forget, he has had ownership, as he's stated, of the Bears under LaFleur.
He has ownership. He lives rent-free in Bears fans' heads. You love to see it.
That's for sure.
Yes. But Dad, anything about... Oh, and also, I think this is actually probably the most important thing for LaFleur against the Bears under LaFleur, is that the Packers have averaged about 113.5 yards on the ground at 4.3 yards per carry and a touchdown a game. And I think they're going to need a little more than that to beat the Bears this time around with a kind of depleted passing game. But I think those are some important statistics to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and the Bears during this time have only scored more than 20 points twice in those 6 games.
What do you know? The Bears still suck.
Yep.
But, yeah, so that's the Packers against the Bears under LaFleur. But I think an important thing to notice, though, is that this is not really the same Bears that the Packers have been playing the last 3 years. They have a lot of turnover, and I think specifically something that would be a bit of a nice blast from the past to take a look at is their new head coach is Matt Eberflus, who was previously the defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts, who had a very nice defense for several years. Was very aggressive. Had Shaquille Leonard right there in the middle, having a really nice series of years under him. And so I thought it would be nice to take a look at how the Packers under LaFleur had done against the Colts with Matt Eberflus to maybe get a little bit of some analysis there on how maybe that might carry over. Under LaFleur against the Colts, they have only played one time in November of 2020, and they lost 34-31. You may remember this game because the key play of the game was MVS having a really crucial fumble on a short outside pass right near the end of the game that kind of pretty much ended the game for the Packers.
Yeah, and MVS got a lot of flack for that, but he did not actually fumble the ball very often. It was
no,
rare.
He did not. That was, I mean, it happens. It's a tough break. But in that game, the Packers did put up 31 points, but they did struggle to run the ball against this Matt Eberflus defense, which is something to keep an eye on Sunday. They only had 66 yards on 3.7 yards per attempt. Now, to be fair, Aaron Jones had 4.1 yards per attempt. Dylan was not playing at this time. But I think it is interesting that the Matt Eberflus-led defense was able to kind of stymie the Packers' rushing attack a bit. And you wonder if, will the Packers have success on the ground against the Bears like they had in the past because the personnel is not as good? Or do you think the Matt Eberflus scheme is going to be able to slow them down a little bit? Dad, what do you think? Which of these sides of the spectrum do you think we're going to land on?
It's a little bit hard to take from that first game, but I suspect that the Packers are going to be able to run the ball.
I hope so.
I think without Shaq Leonard in the center of that D,
Bears still got Roquan Smith though.
He's not as good as
no, he's
Shaquille
not.
Leonard. I don't.
He's
think
very
so.
good, but he's not as good.
And they also don't have DeForest Buckner.
Yeah, and Akeem Hicks is not there anymore.
Who was right, and so at that that time, I think DeForest Buckner was already on.
Yes, they traded him after
they'd
the
already
NFC
traded
Championship game or after the Super Bowl.
His last year in San Francisco, so that Colts defense was actually really good that year.
Yeah, They
What was
were.
interesting is that
And the
also I was
Packers
looking-
did still throw. They still threw the air out of the ball. They threw for 301 yards and 3 touchdowns. Rodgers did have 1 pick, but that's a pretty nice stat line in the air.
Yeah, this was actually the Packers. I was looking at the last regular season loss that year.
Yeah. In that 2020 year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a waste of a year. That felt like the year. Now, well. But anyway, that's kind of our blast from the past. A bit of a summary on how some previous things we think might be impactful going into this game. Some news, some small stats and details that we think are kind of nice little reference points to go off of, nice little jumping off points. I do personally agree with you, Dad, that I do think they'll be able to run the ball. I think they'll be able to run the ball up the middle. I worry a little about running outside. I think they're going to need to run outside to slow down the pass rush and help these tackles out. But it's just so tough to
If we
actually
could just get one starting tackle back.
I was going to say, it's really tough to know how it's going to go with how murky the O-line
If
situation
we could
is.
just get one starting tackle back, it would make such a difference to the whole rest of the O-line. But anyway,
Well,
we have a little bit more
we're
to talk
losing
about.
linemen before we're gaining them back.
This
but
is true.
like you
But
said,
we could go on to talk about. We had a little bit more on the Bears to follow up.
yeah,
with
because
some of their
we thought
changes.
that this, since the first time playing the Bears this year, and you guys kind of know narratively what's going on with the Packers, we kind of wanted to give you a bit of a brush up on what's going on in Bears world. So we're going to kind of try and do this for each of our opponents on our lead-in games. Just kind of a little summary of what's going on with them, how their season's going, what happened to them in the offseason, etc. So for the Bears, my first note here is that the Bears still suck. I think that's written in pen and Sharpie and is on a stone commandment somewhere at the top of Mount Zion. The Bears still suck. They actually do really suck this year. They have lost a lot of mainstays from the last few years, to be fair. They lost Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, Eddie Goldman, Danny Trevathan. Matt Nagy, that's a really tough loss right there. But like I said, they let a lot of people go. They fired their coaching staff. It was just not working for them anymore. As sad as it is to see him go, Matt Nagy is no longer with the Bears. They did hire Matt Eberflus, the former defensive coordinator of the Colts, to be their head coach, like we said before. And they hired away Luke Getsy, our former quarterbacks coach, to be their offensive coordinator. So that's something interesting to keep an eye on. Right. I think the big thing that they're looking at this year, they are not trying to win. They did not really bolster their roster in the offseason. They didn't really have the picks to anyways. I think the main thing they're looking at is whether or not the new coaching staff can make Justin Fields' potential into production, despite having some iffy pieces around them. And just kind of they're trying to get a good draft pick this year. The win last week was kind of a nice little moment for them, but I think overall it's going to be a tough year for the Bears, and that's kind of narratively what's going on.
Their weapons are very
with them.
limited. Their offensive line is suspect. They've lost a lot.
Sounds kind of familiar.
They've lost a lot of, but they used to have a good defense that you could count on, and they've lost a lot of
That's true.
Mainstays on that defense up front, especially.
Yeah, they still got some of the guys in the secondary running around, like Jalen Johnson and Eddie Jackson. But yeah, a lot of the front is gone. They still have Robert Quinn. They still have some good players. They still have Roquan Smith, even though they don't want to pay him for some reason. Who knows why?
Right. I'm happy before the season started. And
they still have some decent players back there. And what's his name? Jaquan Brisker, their rookie out of Penn State, had a really nice week one, apparently. He was a second-round pick for them. And I think he's someone to keep an eye on for this game because he was making plays out there, and he had a really nice preseason, too.
And the Bears have added a couple other former Packers in addition to
Coach to Getsy.
Got Equinemius St. Brown, who had the TD last week, and
he had one of their touchdowns last week.
And this week's honorary captain, Lucas Patrick.
Yeah, Lucas Patrick is an honorary captain for them this week. He's their starting center right now. He had a broken finger in camp, but I think he's back 100% now. But yeah, some former Packers selling some trade secrets, so to speak.
Right.
But anyway, that's kind of what's going on in Bears world, just kind of a quick summary. And now we're going to kind of get down to our general thoughts on the game. We're kind of a little bit more freeform, just kind of how we feel about the game and ask any questions back and forth between each other. So I think the first thing that we wanted to talk about is what about the Bears might present a tough matchup to the Packers. Do you want to start it off, Ted?
So I'll start off with my thoughts. I think on the Bears offense, I think one thing the Packers defense to do is to worry about containing field scrambles. I mean, he had some good runs against the Niners. The one where
he's very dynamic.
The right end is bearing down on him, and he dodges it and runs for a 12-yard gain, which was a really nice quick move. And so it's interesting to see how the Packers are going to play this. Are they going to have a spy, which is one reason why it's nice that Quay Walker seems to be getting ready to go. And so they'll have both of their rangy, fast inside linebackers.
Isaiah McDuffie season, Dad. Isaiah McDuffie season. Come on now.
He's still going to get a lot of snaps.
He probably
Especially
will,
if they go to the 3 linebacker set again.
I wonder if they will without Chris Barnes.
They won't
but anyway.
But then they don't have an extra, so they might not. So that's the one thing that the Packers should be looking for on the Packers defense is, I think anyway, is one of the tricks is that, and they've had trouble with this in the past. Even last year,
Tyler Huntley murdered them
running, and Huntley and what is his name, Heineke for the
Washington Heineke killed us.
Commanders killed them with running. They couldn't contain running quarterbacks. So that's something I think they really need to pay attention to. And then for the Bears defense,
if I can just throw something in there real quick. I do think that, last week the Packers playing a crap ton of zone kind of screwed them, especially because they didn't execute the zone very well. But against a mobile quarterback, zone is the way to go because you're keeping your eyes in the backfield and you're not turning your back to the play. And I think that the Packers being a base zone team will definitely help them in that respect.
Yeah, that's a good point. That could make it easier to rally to these scrambles.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of my thoughts on that. And, just as a bit of a sprinkling in here, Justin Fields did only average about 200 yards passing against the Packers last year, 1.5 touchdowns, 1.5 picks. And then I'm looking up his rushing stats really quick. He ran for almost 60 yards a contest, though, at almost about 8 yards a carry. So they have not really contained him on the ground before.
That's a lot better than
that's better than I thought it was even
last week against the Niners in the rain.
Yeah, he had about 60 yards at 7.8 a carry. So, I can say they play zone and it'll help, but it didn't help all that much last year. So that's going to be something they're going to need to keep an eye on because they do struggle with mobile quarterbacks.
They have in the past. I'm hoping that with the
addition of
Quay speed, they'll be able to chase them down sideline to sideline, and it'd be interesting if they have one of them spy on them. And then the other thing I'd say the Bears
would you have one of them designated would you have a designated spy? Do you think?
I think in a game like this where they have so few actual weapons you need to worry about, I think you can afford to essentially take one of the linebackers out of other responsibilities to watch Fields. Yeah. Because they don't. I mean, I guess Kmet is a decent player, though he had no catches last week.
Darnell Mooney's a pretty good player too.
Yeah, but I don't think they have enough where you need to have as much pass coverage.
Fields is more dangerous than their weapon. Fields' legs are more dangerous than their weapons are, in my opinion.
I think so.
Yeah, and I mean tying that in is the D line has got to stay in their rush lanes. They got to not be abandoning their rush lanes. That's a big thing for
a little bit more two-gapping
Fields rushing
and not just trying to get a field as quickly as possible.
Looking at you, Rashawn. I love Gary, but I know he's going to at least run past his lane a couple times. But it is what it is. We'll take the good with the bad there. And
then on the other side, my other thought of what the Bears, one thing to worry about is keep an eye on Robert Quinn, who had 18.5 sacks last year.
Yeah,
so they should have an eye, and whether he's going to just line up right over Jake Hansen if Jake Hansen is on the field.
I do think, and I could be wrong about this, I think he mostly lines up against the left tackle.
Yeah, so you're right. I'm just making any wild conjecture because I don't know what their tendencies are.
I mean,
how much they move around.
I'm not sure either. I just remember watching a lot of the highlights against the Niners, and I remember mostly seeing him work against the left tackle, and then their rookie work against McGlinchey. and he was having a lot of success against McGlinchey. So that's kind of why I was thinking, was Robert Quinn mostly on the left tackle in that game? But I could be wrong. But my thing
I would prefer that.
Yeah, I know, right? It might not matter who we're putting up against Newman. Sorry, Newman, but the tape wasn't pretty. The tape does not lie. But my thing that I think that makes the Bears a tough matchup is the fact that their offensive coordinator, like we said, Getsy, knows the Packers really well and kind of knows what to expect out of them. And I think that could make it a bit of a tough matchup. In addition to, obviously, what you said, I think the biggest thing, obviously, is Justin Fields' mobility is the toughest part of this matchup. But that's mostly what we think about the Bears being a tough matchup. And I think the next thing we want to talk about kind of is how do we think the Bears will try to exploit the Packers? What on the Packers do you think the Bears are going to try and look at and attack?
Right. So this is more about what scheme or strategy we think the Bears might employ to try to take advantage of what they see as Packers' weaknesses. So
and I think the biggest thing
we
is
have
the
stuff to
whole
talk about.
the whole right side of the Green Bay O-line, which is kind of like what they did to the Niners. They kind of abused the Niners' right side of that O-line a little bit.
So they went after McGlinchey, and they went after that side instead of after Trent Williams.
Although apparently, I was talking to Gavin, and Trent Williams apparently gave up the most pressures on the day.
See, he didn't.
At least that's what Gavin said. Gavin did not give me any sources, but that's what he told me.
So I would look for them to try to have defensive alignments that take advantage of the perceived weakness of the Packers' right side of their O-line. To get pressure on Rodgers.
Yeah, I think that's what they would try to exploit the most. And I think, it's tough because the Bears they're not a very good team. They're going to need to have some things break their way. I do think designed runs to Fields would make a killing against us. I do think so. I think we play a very aggressive style of defense.
I hope
some misdirection quarterback runs. I think we'd see some Kaepernick-esque runs out there where he's just breaking free in the playoffs for 80 yards.
That's
deep
a
cut,
pleasant memory.
deep buried, deep-seated memory.
And then in terms of what the Bears might try to do to take advantage to exploit the Packers, the Bears' offense is potentially try to put pressure on the Green Bay defensive communication with, say, crossing routes or thing where they have to.
Teams are going to do that. Teams are going to do that until the Packers
to pass receivers off properly through the zone,
and probably lots of motion
last week.
Probably lots of motion to do the exact same thing because teams are going to do that until the Packers prove that they're not going to run into each other.
League, as
exactly,
everybody says.
And the Packers were getting murdered by motion last week. Getsy is from Green Bay. He does motion in his sleep. They will probably be doing a lot of motion, I would imagine. And, the Packers couldn't handle it last week. They better be ready to handle it this week, or they're going to keep seeing it every single week. But I think that's what I would do as well. A lot of motion, a lot of short crossers, a lot of trying to get people from one zone to another and make the Packers pass them off and make the Packers have good communication rules because they didn't last week. And it was really bad. But that's kind of what we're feeling like the Bears will try to do. But let's kind of flip it around because, the Packers are favored in this game. I think they're 10.5-point favorites the last time I saw, which is quite a bit. But how do we think the Packers are going to try to exploit the Bears? What do you think the Packers are going to try and do to give themselves an advantage?
So I expect that the Packers will try to apply pressure to Fields to rush throws and take advantage of what was expected to be one of the weaker offensive lines in the league. Though, as you found out, Tevin Jenkins actually graded pretty well last
Tevin Jenkins
week.
had a pretty good game. He's their second round pick from last year.
Yeah, and he was a player that I kind of liked coming out as a potential Packer.
Yeah,
maybe because of the
struggled with injury, struggled with back injuries last year. Well, struggled with injury last year, to be fair. He had back problems last year and didn't really play that much. But he struggled. He had a lot of injuries over the summer as well during camp. Didn't come back to practice till very late. But I had a pretty nice game one based on PFF grades at least, and was out there moving. He had only one pressure allowed, an 81.7 total grade. But yeah, so let's see if that's because of the weather. He was able to block a little bit better using his strength.
I also think the group as a whole
no, it's not very good.
That well. When they had, you know, only, what was it, 17? How many passing plays? I think 2 sacks out of a small number of passing plays.
That's
so
true. It's a small sample.
Very much.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, I do agree. The Packers are... I mean, the Packers... If the Packers' D-line is what we think it is, they should have a massive advantage in the trenches when they're on defense. Massive. This is the worst O-line in the league, I think. I know they played all right week 1. On paper, at least, the worst O-line in the league. They should rip through them. If they're as good as they think they can be, as like a lot of them are talking over the offseason, like we think we can be one of the best fronts in the league. I know Joe Barry was saying he thinks this front is special. This is the type of game where a special front would dominate. So
I'm hoping to see Justin Fields like running
optimistically, this could be a statement game for the Packers D-line.
Yes. Just take over the game. Have Justin Fields running backwards, looking for
a hope, a prayer,
looking for a prayer, and then just throw one up for grabs.
And
that's what I'm hoping.
Justin Fields, to borrow an old adage from the great Preston Smith, when speaking about Russell Wilson, like trying to catch a chicken in a field with no fence.
Yeah,
which is what Preston Smith said about Russell Wilson like
that was
2-3 years ago in the playoffs.
Where he almost got the comeback.
I mean, the thing is, like, you can get back there, but catching him's a whole other problem because that's why keeping those rush lanes is going to be really important. The D-line can't just be aggressive. Like, it needs to be good and disciplined.
I think
the whole
what you
game
do is collapse the pocket. Just crush the pocket around him.
Just fold it down like a little origami shell.
Right.
Yeah. They should be able to dominate the Bears O-line, but the next problem is getting home. But I think that
which was an issue last week. They were getting some pressures, but they couldn't get home.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that I was looking at, which we kind of talked about briefly, that I think the Packers could try and exploit, and honestly are going to have to try and exploit if they want to get things done on offense, is they're going to have to find a way to run the ball. And I think specifically there is a decent amount of opportunity there to run the ball up the middle. Like we were saying, their lowest graded players were a linebacker and 2D tackles last week, and the Niners ran it pretty well. I think that, that kind of indicates that, I know it's only a 1-game small sample size, that the Packers might be able to have some success running it up the middle, especially with Dillon and Jones. And I know the edge rushers for the Bears are pretty powerful, they're probably their better players on defense right now, especially if what Dominique Robinson showed his first game is real. It's actually very interesting. I think he's a converted tight end. But like I was saying before I got sidetracked, I think the Packers are going to need to find a way to run, and I think running up the middle might be the way to do that, given how the grading for Week 1 turned out, and the fact that the Packers' best O-linemen are in the middle of the line, and by that I mean Josh Myers and maybe Zach Tom.
What side of the middle are you talking about?
Kind of Zach Tom. I think they're going to need to run left middle.
I would say middle left.
Yeah, I was going to say run to Myers, Tom, and Nyman. I know Tom, like we all love to say Tom's the savior. He didn't have a great Week 1, but it wasn't as bad as Hanson.
Egregious pressure, but otherwise I thought, and so that
you thought he was okay.
He got a bad grade from PFF, and maybe they really penalized him a lot for letting. I can't remember who it was, but he got beat on one play in a pass rush. Mm-hmm. But I didn't see any other mistakes by him in my rewatch.
Yeah, I think they got to use Dillon and Jones more, and I think some of that up the middle, like between the left A gap, right in the left A gap, is going to be the way to go. But that's kind of how we think that the Packers can exploit the Bears. Did you have anything else in that section that you wanted to touch on?
I think I'd like to see if the Packers can take advantage of what's expected to be one of the worst secondaries in the league.
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting to me because they have some decent-ish pieces. Because Jalen Johnson is not bad.
But, most outlets, I think, have them near the bottom of the league. And just going to quick look, PFF preseason, so not including the first game, had them as the 31st, second to last.
I was going to say, who was 32nd?
Was it Houston? I can't remember.
Could be. That tracks.
It might have been Houston. So they're better than Houston. Congratulations, Bears.
That's a gold star. But I don't know. I know their secondary is probably not amazing, but Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker, their rookie, I think is supposed to be pretty good. They still got Eddie Jackson over there, who has had a rough couple of years, but was really good about 3-4 years ago, back when he had Amos. Shout out Adrian Amos. Exactly. Adrian Amos, eternally the most underrated player in the league. And then they have another rookie, Kyler Gordon, who I think they have some hope for playing corner too. So I think their secondary is definitely very young and inexperienced, and that is definitely something the Packers could take advantage of. But I do think that there is still some talent there. It's not totally bereft of like any NFL player.
Some of those predictions, I think, can't take as much account for the contributions of first-year players.
Yeah,
it's a little up in the air how good.
But
they're
also,
gonna be.
If they're first-year players, it's hard to play corner as a first year. It's hard to play safety as a first year. Rodgers should be able to trick them a few times. You would hope.
Yes, so that's what I'm looking. That's one of the things I'm looking for.
Yeah. But I guess now let's transition to kind of our next section, final section, a little bit of what are we keeping our eyes out for? What do we think people should be looking at and looking for during this game and going into this game? Like, what are some tidbits that we're kind of excited to see, kind of nervous to see, but things that we're aware of going into and during this game?
So should I go first?
Yeah, sure.
So I had two things that
age before beauty.
I'm first either way.
Okay, you're done. You're done. Go ahead. Go ahead, old man.
So one thing I was looking at is, will Green Bay take more deep shots this week against the Bears? I mean, last week they had the one wide open to Watson and he dropped it. And then there weren't very many. There was the desperation near the end of the half that was picked when Rodgers under pressure tried to find Cobb. But there weren't that many deep shots. And so some of that will depend on, can the O-line hold up better this time against the Bears than they did against the Vikings? And I think the Vikings have a better pass rush.
Can the receivers please catch the deep shots?
Yes. And so I hope that they will go to that well a little bit more than they did last week. And then the other thing I had is, will they simply have more touches for Jones and Dillon?
They have to. That was one of mine as well. Can we talk about that a little bit? I will lose my mind if they lose this game and Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon total less than 25 touches.
Yeah,
I'll lose my brain.
They should combined have like 30 a game.
35, 40.
Okay.
I don't care. They're the two best players.
Jones only had 8 in the first 8 touches in the first game. That is,
8 touches and only 10 opportunities. He only had 5 targets. What are we doing? Why? It's like no one told them.
In the games where Adams has missed the last few years, he's had like 7 a game.
Doesn't make
receptions. So why did he have so few?
They seemed woefully unprepared with any kind of game plan last week that made sense, at least to me. And I know I don't know as much as they do, but why are we not? I feel like giving your best players the ball is just such a simple idea.
It was like I feel like there's like a couple of almost conflicting things. Like on the one hand, they were like too stubborn and stuck to certain things that weren't necessarily a good fit for the matchup, and on the other hand, they're like trying to show everybody how clever they were.
But it's also like I think they do get stuck in some stuff with LaFleur where it's like. They want the offense to have a rhythm, and I think he's worried that force-feeding one player is going to knock it out of a rhythm. I don't know if that's true, though, because when they were force-feeding Dillon, they were moving the rock.
Yeah. And I don't think LaFleur follows this kind of it's a really old-school philosophy that if you can't stop this, I'm just going to keep doing it until you stop it.
They should. They should be. They
Like,
should
if
run
you,
it
you
until.
gotta prove you can stop this before I'm gonna stop trying it.
Yeah, and I think those are definitely two really important things to keep an eye on. I think that the things that I'm keeping an eye on, and I think we can probably talk on for a little bit, is who on earth is going to play O-line this week? Because if Runyon is out, I guess my pick would be... This is going to sound controversial, but I'm not sure. They're not going to do this. This is what I would do. Nyman, Tom, Myers. No, wait. Sorry. Nyman. Oh, God. This is tough. I think, personally, Nyman, Hanson, Myers, Newman, Tom. I think is what I would do. Nyman, Hanson, Myers, Newman, Tom. If Runyon and Elton and Bakhtiari can't go.
All three of those.
What I think they will do is Nyman, Tom, Myers, Hanson, Newman again, and pray to God.
I think they'll do what they ended the game with.
Say like 5 Hail Marys and just pray.
And I don't think they do anything crazy like Nyman, Tom, Myers.
If you
Newman.
say Caleb Jones,
Caleb
it's not gonna
Jones.
happen. Caleb Jones is not playing.
No,
Caleb
he's
Jones is
not
100%, unless something horrible happens. Knock on wood. I don't think
You're
Caleb
right.
Jones touches the field.
Things
I
are
would
going,
be
like,
a bit surprised if Caleb Jones was active.
He probably won't be.
Yeah.
But they're probably going to want 3 subs.
You want to know what's weird?
So if Bakhtiari
Wait,
and
but
Jenkins,
you want to know what's weird though? Sean Ryan alive? Is Sean Ryan okay?
is he at a milk carton?
Do we know where he is? Should he not be playing? Like, you picked him in the 3rd round. He can't play.
He just hasn't been ready. And we saw that at least we are hearing that out of training camp and preseason, that he's just not ready.
That's just crazy to me.
Maybe Rasheed Walker.
I was going to say Rasheed Walker at right tackle.
He might
Maybe.
be. I think he's ahead of Ryan right now after starting
It's
to play a
different
little bit at the end
positions.
of training camp. I know.
I think Walker's a tackle
but then
only.
then you bump Newman
I mean,
inside.
Walker would play before Caleb Jones played.
I think so. So I'm thinking I suspect they're going to want to have at least 8.
Okay, assuming the
linemen
5
active.
Assuming the 5 are the 5 that played at the end of the last game.
That's
by
far the most likely.
Who is
scenario.
the next man up?
Well, it's got to be Sean Ryan or Rasheed Walker, right? Who's left?
Like, that's not good. That's actually effing really bad.
So it's if I'm hoping that Jenkins is going to be active, and so everybody's. But
I would not hold your breath.
not after we've already been predicted that they probably wouldn't be. But just think about who's left on the team. They have 11 O linemen on the team now, right? After promoting Caleb Jones.
And 3 are out.
3 are out. And so I think everybody else is going to have to be active, so they have 3 subs. I don't think
that's
they'll go
true.
in with just 7.
They don't even have that many.
So that means Caleb Jones, Rasheed Walker, and Sean Ryan
that's
are your
frightening.
only 3 subs.
That's very frightening. The O-line depth this might be the worst the O-line depth has been.
Yeah. So
It's not good.
They'll be going into that game with 2 second-year starters, a rookie starter, and 3 rookie backups.
I had not thought about that. That is terrifying.
Isn't that insane?
Knock on wood. Yeah, I can't believe
and
they
one
haven't
of those
signed
other
anyone
starters
yet.
is only a third-year player who didn't even make the team like his first year. And then the other starter,
And
your
then
anchor,
Nyman's only started for
your
your best player.
your
He's
anchor
only
at left tackle.
He's only started for a year.
Has only had 1 year of starting.
But not even a full year, and not even a 1.5 years on a roster. Oh man, yeah, that woof.
So it's kind of crazy
Woof.
right now.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about how precarious the depth was. But anyway, that's the thing that I'm keeping my eye on. Maybe I'll just close my eyes now because I do not want to see that shit. Not even a little. The other thing that I'm kind of keeping my eye on covalent bonds.
You're keeping your ions on.
Keeping my ions on. Can you tell it's late? Is which receivers will any receiver break out? Pretty much. How will Lazard look in his first action if he plays? Knock on wood. Will Watson bounce back? Will Dobbs continue to have? He had a nice week 1. Will they give him more opportunities in week 2? Will Sammy Watkins stop being a ghost? Will he actually show up to the game? I did not see him out there last week. Will Randall Cobb get more chances?
He had a couple catches, but like no real juice afterwards. He only had like very little gain after the catch.
Will Amari Rodgers exit the doghouse? I don't know if you guys saw, but they asked Aaron Rodgers what Amari has to do, or like what he thought about Amari, and all Aaron Rodgers said was, "He's returning kicks for us right now." That's all I got.
That's all I got.
I'm like, holy shit! You did not have to roast him that badly. That's too much. Like, we did not need to do that. He could have just said, Amari's really trying out. He could have literally given the most platitudes he's ever given, and it would have been better than what he said. When keeping it real goes wrong, as they say.
Pause for a drink of water.
Yeah, it was really bad. But he had some nice things to say about Watson and Dobbs and said, they're trying out there. So makes you wonder, like, what's going on with Amari? Which it feels like Amari's like a really hard worker. It seems like every time they interview him, he's like really all about the work. So I don't really know what's going on with all that. But
I don't know what's going on there either.
Yeah, but so what receiver will break out, I guess, is what I'm keeping my eye on. Do you have any feeling on?
I think if Lazard plays and is healthy enough to be close to full, I think he can have a big game. I think he's going to play a lot of slot. Mm-hmm. And even Aaron Rodgers has said this, that Lazard is going to be playing a lot of slot, and I think Cobb will play less, and I think they'll have
Dobbs and Watkins,
Watson, and Watkins on the outside.
I feel like Cobb is borderline like third down only at this point in his career.
Possibly.
I just don't see what he's really giving you out there on early downs.
And so that's one thing I expected. I think that Lazard could feast in the slot. Some of those
I hope so.
Slot fades and other. He's been successful with those routes in the past.
He's a good big slot.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I'm keeping my eye on. But let's kind of wrap it up here. We're going a little long. Score predictions, Dad. You want to go first?
So I'm going 27-17 Packers.
Nice. Go Pack.
So I think the Packers should still win this pretty easily. I'm giving the Bears a little more credit on their offense than I would have otherwise, because they managed to score 19 points in the rain last week.
Yep.
Against what's supposed to be a good Niners D, though who had the advantage in all that rain? I have no freaking idea. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, I am also taking the Packers in this matchup. I think it would be disastrous if they started 0-2 versus the NFC North, especially against the Bears and Vikings. I got the Packers 35-14. I think the offense is going to bounce back, hopefully. I think they're going to run the ball well. I think they're going to control the game pretty soundly. It's a primetime game. Yeah, I think the Packers prevail, 35-14. But anyway, well, that's kind of all we had today, huh?
I think that covers it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks everyone for giving us a listen here at the Father Son Packers podcast. We really appreciate you guys coming over and listening. Like we said, please give us a follow on Twitter at Father Son Packer, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Father Son Packers podcast. You can catch us on pretty much any major podcast streaming platform of choice, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. But yeah, we will also be doing a post-game pod Sunday night after the game, after Sunday Night Football versus the Bears, hopefully after a win this time. But until then, catch you next time. Go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.